Okay, for this demonstration, I'm just going to show you some basic ideas for value and shading. I'm just using two pencils, a 2B and a 6B. The 2B is a little bit harder than the 6B and will give me more detail, whereas the 6B will give me a little bit darker value. I tend to use really just those, maybe an HB, which is a little bit harder, and that gives me some lining capabilities with a little bit less likelihood of actually marking the paper. So what I did was I simply sketched 3 circles, and I'm going to make them look a little bit less like they are all on the same plane by doing a few things. The one that's closest to us will be the smaller circle, and going away from us is going to be the larger circle. So one thing we need to decide is where our light source is and where the shadows will be. So I'm going to do this with my light source coming this direction, and my cast shadow will be on this side. So when you have a strong light source, it's going to throw a shadow on your subject. Okay? So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to show you some different ways of shading. One thing you can do is you can simply shade, which is the way I usually do it, in little tiny pieces, little sections going back and forth until I get a nice even shade on whatever it is that I want. If I want darker, I simply go over it again and maybe push a little bit harder, blend it into what I'm doing, go back again, give a little bit more of a shade on the edge, blend that in. You can see I have sort of different levels of what we call value, dark value and medium value here. And this is your typical shading stroke. Very small, not pushing very hard. You can do what's called scumbling, and that is simply your figure eights over and over and over and over. It gives you a little bit of texture. Same idea. And you just scumble over and over more in the areas you want darker. This is really good for when you're doing fabric texture, flowers, grass, that kind of thing. You can do crosshatch. Very, very common style of shading. Where you want something darker, you add more crosshatches. Whatever suits your fancy. Depends a little bit on what you're doing. If you want smooth skin, you're not going to be using cross-hatching or scumbling. You're going to use a light shading technique. If you want texture, you can look at the others and add, the occasional dark strokes in, give you something to really bring out flowers, grass, whatever you're drawing. Now, as far as erasing goes, I try not to erase, but I will use a gummy eraser. I'll make it nice and warm, kind of get it small. This is not one that I will scrape the paper with. It's what I use to pick up pencil with. So I'm going to dab. You can see how quickly that picks up a lot of that pencil. So if I want to put in a light sheen of something and not have it real obvious that it's pencil strokes, I can just sort of lighten it up like that. If I need to go back, I can certainly add more pencil again. Just want to make sure that my gummy eraser is warm and sticky, and I'm just going to dab up my pencil. If you want to actually erase something, use your magic rub. This one is very well used, but a magic rub will not tear your paper, and Bristol is a lot more forgiving. So that's what I use to completely erase all of my marks. Now, one of the things I do is I use the softer pencils, all the B's and the HB, because they don't leave a mark as much on my paper. If you use an H pencil, that's much harder and it will mark your paper. So we're going to start with the circles here, and we're going to mark this one as the closest, so that means our values are dark, medium, and light are going to be very strong darks, very light lights, and a middle value. This will be less so. So we're going to start with the guy in front here. And now I've drawn a very light circle, and one thing we'll talk about is not actually outlining what it is you're drawing, but for this I'm going to show you how to do that just by a very, very light circle, and then we're going to sort of erase some of this and show you how to use negative space to make your circles look more realistic. So my light source is here. That means my lightest spot is going to be this area, and my darkest spot will be here on this side. So I'm going to start with my dark spot. Now I'm going to switch to my 6B, which is a much softer lead. I'm going to start with the separation between these two circles. Okay, we're going to make this like a steel ball. And I'm not going to be pretty about this because I'm just, showing you an example of how to start with your shading. We can clean this up as we go, but I'm going to be quick about it, so it's not going to be pretty. I'm just going to give you a basic concept of this. So this is my shadowed side. Okay, so I'm going to start scratching in some of my shading, and I'm going to lighten up as I come up the circle itself. It's important that you sort of go with the direction of your object and not just go straight across. You want to give it dimension, and the way you do that is you try not to show pencil strokes unless it's something specific that you want to illustrate. So try and go in different directions, a little scumbling maybe, smooth it out. But you can see that my dark is sort of encircling this shape here like a crescent moon. And as I come up to the center of this circle, I'm going to start to lighten up a little bit on how much I'm putting on the paper until I get to my light spot. By doing this, you're going to give shape without actually drawing your circle. So I'm going to start to lighten up here. And if I have to, I'll switch to my 2B, which is a little bit lighter. I'm going to see if I can do this all with one pencil here, just to show you the difference. So here's my middle value, light value, middle value, dark value. Probably need a little bit more dark here. Seems like I'm kind of skimpy there with it. Okay. Probably should have worn my glasses. It'd be a little bit easier for me to do this, especially since I've been staring at trains all day. I'm getting a little bit dark there, so I'm going to have to go back and lighten that up as I go, but that's not a problem. So you can see I'm starting to curve. Rather than just doing this, I'm curving my strokes and the lead that I'm putting down. I sort of imagine these as like steel balls. So a lot of middle value here. A little bit of an outline with my shading, not much. I'll have to go and take that out a little bit with my eraser, which I like to do. I like to sort of get my pencil down first. And here you can sort of see the issue with outlining. I've got a dark line where I really don't want it, so I may have to lighten that up a little bit. Less is more kind of thing. But you can see now I'm starting to get a circular shape. Starting to lighten up with my touch. And I'm going to leave a little white spot. So I'm going to leave some negative space there. I've got a nice round ball instead of just a circle. I'm going to take a scumbling stick. In this case, it's just a Q-tip. I'm going to start in the light spot. I'm going to sort of blend that in a little bit. Go down to my medium areas. Sort of blend that in more. And you'll see that some of your pencil strokes really show up more than you wanted them to, and that's where your gummy eraser is going to be really great, because we can take some of that out. And yes, this is cheating. You should be able to do this with pencil and patience, but for the purposes of demonstration, we'll speed this along a little bit. Okay, kind of looks like a little bit of a planet there. So I got some light spots, trying to clean up here a little bit. All right, so now I'm going to go back and I'm going to put that light spot back in. Kind of blend out the edges a little bit. All right, take my gummy eraser, squish it around a little bit, pick up some of this here, including the outline. And you can dab it a little bit. Turn it so you don't get a pattern. Okay. So, basic idea of how to create a little three-dimensional orb. Yeah, I might erase it too much. Go back in with my 2B and clean up that edge a little bit. And I will do a lot of erasing and reapplying until I get what it is that I want. See how much better that looks now. This is still pretty well outlined here. Maybe dab that up a little bit. Just very easily go back in. Clean up my circle a little bit. Lighten it back up until I get it to where it's looking like something that isn't necessarily outlined but has some shape to it. And I think you get the point. So I'm going to spend a lot more time doing this, but you get the idea. You don't want to actually draw an outline, a line outline. You want to use your shading to define the edge of your object. So if that means coming back in with a little bit of dark around the edge, that's cool. And just keep working at it until you get the shape you want, okay? So, that's one. Now, we're going to work on the others. I'm going to show you how to separate these. So, you've got your light source here. It's going to be the same for these. However, this will obviously be blocking the light to this ball. So you have to have a cast shadow effect. But we also have what's called reflected shadow. So there's going to be light bouncing onto this, and it's going to be reflecting back onto this guy, backwards. And so what we're going to do is we're going to cheat a little bit. Now you have to remember that things work in a photograph that don't work in real life. So you have to really study your subjects to kind of figure out what the lighting is. So the basic idea for this is going to be exactly the same. I'm going to take my 6B. I do the same thing. Start with my darks. I tend to do that just because I'm heavy-handed when I start. And I'm going to sort of define where my light's going to be. the reflected light is going to show back in a semicircle beneath this guy. Probably should have made these guys a little smaller, but these aren't going to be quite as pretty as the first guy, just because I'm trying to, get the basic concept down. But the reason we want to do this is you never want to outline a dark against a dark. You don't want to outline anything. So you use a light outline, which I usually use with, or get with an eraser. I'll show you how we do that. So we're going to sort of not really do much around here. Going to kind of leave this guy like that. We're going to start to shade. Like we did before. He's not going to have as bright of a light spot. And once I get this in, if I don't think the bright spot on my first ball is bright enough, I'll go back and add it in. And I think I'm going to end up doing that now that I see this one next to it. Okay, so I've got my basic shading in. Take my scumbling stick or Q-tip. Start blending it a little bit. Now I only use the blending for really smooth surfaces, and Bristol is great for that because it doesn't have any tooth. It doesn't grab your pencil very easily. So it's really, really great for doing portraits or glass, things that are super smooth. And I may have to make him a little darker here to really kind of separate those out. And you don't want, when you're doing something like dark against light or against another object, you don't stop at the border of the other object. You have to go beyond it. Otherwise it's called kissing, and the shapes kiss and it looks really weird. So be careful when you put two things next to each other that they are offset, that they don't do that. It looks really bizarre. All right, so you can see this guy's a little bit lighter than the other guy. He still has values. He's got a dark, medium, and light, but not quite as intense as the one in front of it, because we want this one to sort of recede into the background. So I've given my little ball a collar here I don't really like, so I'm going to kind of pick that up a little bit. And go back in and fill that back with some more color, or value rather. Gotta be careful with your terms there. Value is not color, it's the value of darkness on a grayscale. Don't want my outline, so I'm going to shade in from it so it doesn't look so much like an outline. this all pretty much with just one pencil, and that's my 6B. Actually, I think this is a 5. This might be a 5. I know you were asking about brand, but it's really individual. You just got to try them out. You know, buy 1 or 2 of each type, and not only see how easily and comfortably they fit in your hand, but whether they break and flake under pressure, how easy it is to sharpen them. You know, you don't want to spend $5 on a pencil and then it breaks every time you go to sharpen it, and so, you know, it's no value to you. And a lot of them do that, so just kind of see what works for you. All right. So a little bit of a reflected shadow there from the guy in front. Starting to see that coming together there. There you go. See that? Okay. And it's not perfect. I think I kind of like it, so I'm going to leave it alone. Now this guy, I'm going to switch to my 2B and see if I can get a little bit lighter of a shade. I've done a little bit too dark of an outline here. I'm not going to worry too much about that. But we're going to just be real soft with our shading here. Same idea. We're going to give a little bit of a reflected shadow. And I'll probably end up going, okay, I've changed my mind to see how scratchy that is. Maybe just that I'm hurrying, but if I'm going to be hurrying, then I want something that's a little softer that I can more easily erase. So I'm going to stick with my 5B or 6B. You can use a 9B, but I find that after a 6, that it really doesn't make much difference. There's no point in having 3 pencils that look identical when you could just be paying for the one you like. I'm kind of a 2B and 6B girl. So the light should be a little bit more this direction than over here. This is going to be your dark side still, so you got to remember where your light source is. So I'm going to have to go in and take some of that dark out. But I'm trying to also consider the reflected light from this guy onto this one. And don't worry too much about, you know, the direction of the stroke per se, because you're going to just be going in all kinds of directions. Leave my white there. Got enough on there to sort of shade it and see what I've created here. Probably a mess, but we'll see. And don't be afraid to make a mistake. Sometimes mistakes turn out to be the best part of your drawing, you know? And a lot of this is trial and error, and everybody's got different opinions of how to do things. You just gotta find what works for you. So don't be afraid to sort of jump into something. But I do want you to really look at maybe looking at some composition books, because composition is huge, and how you set something up, how you put it on the paper is what makes it interesting. That's one of my biggest flaws, is that I'm not patient with my composition. I don't plan it out very well usually. So I get irritated and bored with stuff. If you look at the composition of the motorcycle, it's not actually a very good composition. It's just technically a good photograph that I copied. Okay, so I'm gonna really start picking up some of this. I'm gonna have to go back in and add some more. Now the one thing about when you use your gummy eraser, and this comes in a square brick, like a gray brick, you'll see it in the store, next to the magic rubs. When you start using this on the paper like this, it will leave a little bit of residue, so I use it reservedly. But I really like it for picking up the graphite in a way that lets me smooth it back out easily. Doesn't leave ridges per se. So go back in. Oops, look what I did. Didn't mean to do that. See, mistakes happen. Go back in, kind of clean up my border there a little bit with some shading, not a line. My shading instead. It gets a little bit thicker as I start coming down the ball. I'm getting a little bit of a grain on here from the eraser. I have left a little bit of residue on there. You can see it's a little bit grainy there. That's the one drawback of the gummy erasers, so use sparingly. Yeah, see, that's gonna chop. Now I can go back in with the gummy eraser at some point when I'm done here and clean up those lines a little bit. I'm gonna try and pick some of that up on this side just to lighten it a little. It's just a little bit too dark. I'm trying to make more of a light colored ball compared to the one next to it. There we go. That's a little bit better. I can go and sort of smooth that out a little bit. As you can see, I don't have as bright a white and as dark a dark as the one in front of it. But I probably need to add a little bit of dark here to separate it out a little bit more from the one behind it. Again, I'm really going fast. I apologize. I just want to sort of get the basic concepts down. I'm kind of a perfectionist, so I really like things perfect, so I could spend hours and hours and hours doing this. But there you go, 3 basic balls. Maybe add a little bit of dark here just to clean it up. Get rid of some of those lighted areas that don't belong. Clean up the border of it. Add some shading in here to round it up a smidge. You can see as soon as I do that, as soon as I start adding in those values, it becomes less flat looking. Okay, all right, so there's the 3 balls. I'm gonna clean this up just a little bit. Okay, all right. So that is how to make something look rounded. And now that I'm looking at it, probably need a little bit more light in the middle there. Get my scumbling stick, shade that back in. Smooth out some of those little spots. Yeah, all right, I'm happier with that.